The night was quiet, save for the soft rustling of the leaves in the trees, their shadows stretching like gentle hands in the moonlight. The air was cool, carrying the scent of rain that had just passed through, leaving behind a sense of renewal. In the distance, the faintest glimmer of starlight sparkled above, while the world seemed to hold its breath in the stillness of the evening. Amara sat by the water's edge, her knees pulled to her chest as she watched the gentle ripples on the surface of the lake. Her heart, though, felt far from still. It had been years since she'd visited this place, years since she'd seen him. The lanterns would float again tonight, just like they always had, but something about tonight felt different. There was a quiet tension in the air, as though the world itself was waiting for something to change. She had come here seeking solace, but the memories of her past, of him, of everything they'd lost, came flooding back as easily as the stars above. They had promised each other that they'd always return to this spot, to the lake where they first met, to release their lanterns together, each year on the full moon. They had hoped it would be a tradition that would last a lifetime, but as life tends to do, it pulled them in different directions. Time and distance had become the quiet killers of promises. Amara reached into her pocket, pulling out a small, folded piece of paper. The ink on it was fading now, the words blurred from years of handling, but it was still there, still clear in her heart. I'll always find you. The wind whispered through the trees, and Amara felt a shiver run down her spine. It was the same breeze, the same gentle tug she'd always felt when she was here with him. And it was then, in the soft silence of the moment, that she realized she wasn't alone. A figure emerged from the shadows, as if the night itself had birthed him. His silhouette was familiar, tall, broad-shouldered, with a kind of grace that made him seem to glide rather than walk. It was him, there after all these years. Her breath caught in her throat as her heart skipped a beat. The same flutter of excitement she had felt the first time their eyes met across this very lake. Amara, he said, his voice as soft as the night wind, but strong enough to send a wave of warmth through her chest. His gaze locked with hers, and for a moment the world seemed to fall away. There was no past, no future, just the two of them in the here and now. You came back, she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips, as if she couldn't quite believe it. I didn't think you would. He smiled, a smile that reached deep into her soul, and shook his head. I never left. They stood there for a while, both lost in the weight of the years that had passed, the quiet aching space between them filled with so many unspoken words. The lanterns, glowing softly in the distance, bobbed gently on the surface of the water, their flickering flames painting delicate patterns on the dark water. I couldn't let it go, Amara, he said, his voice raw with something that sounded like regret. Not the lanterns, not this place, not you. Her throat tightened. I didn't know how to come back, to forgive myself, to forgive us. Her hands trembled as she reached for the lantern she had brought with her, the one she had been holding on to for so long, hoping that tonight it would finally set everything right. He walked over to her, his fingers brushing against hers, a touch so light it felt like a whisper against her skin. He offered her his own lantern, a new one that hadn't been there when they first made their promise. Maybe we don't need to fix everything, he said. Maybe we just need to let it go. Amara looked at the lantern in his hands, then back at the soft glow of the water. It was so simple, this ritual they had shared. The lanterns were meant to carry away the weight of their grief, to give it to the water and let it flow downstream. But it had always been more than that. It was a symbol of hope, of healing, of trust. She met his eyes, and the words she had been holding on to for years finally tumbled out. I never stopped loving you. The smile that spread across his face wasn't just a smile. It was everything, every moment they had missed, every apology they hadn't said. It was the answer to all the questions that had haunted her in the dark of the night. And with that one simple, heartfelt expression, the years of longing and regret seemed to melt away, as though they had never been. Without another word, they both knelt by the edge of the lake, placing their lanterns gently into the water. As they did, the lanterns began to drift apart, floating like tiny stars in the dark water, each one carrying with it a piece of their past, their pain, their hopes for the future. Amara's hand brushed against his once more, and this time the touch wasn't fleeting. She felt the warmth of his skin, the steady pulse of his heartbeat. He had always been her anchor in the storm, and now it seemed that she was his. Together, they sat in the stillness of the night, watching the lanterns float away, their light reflecting in the rippling water, fading into the distance like dreams that were finally allowed to take flight. And as the soft glow of the lanterns disappeared into the horizon, Amara closed her eyes, letting the peace of the night wash over her. She knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, no longer haunted by the past, but carrying it with them as gently as the water carried the light. The breeze whispered through the trees once more, but this time it felt like a sigh of relief, a quiet promise that, in the end, everything would be okay. The moonlight softened as the lanterns drifted farther, their glow becoming faint as they joined others on the water's vast, reflective canvas. For a moment, everything felt weightless, as though the earth itself had let go of its gravity just for them. Amara could feel the pull of the night, the gentle hum of the universe settling around them like a warm, familiar blanket. But the peace she had longed for so desperately wasn't complete yet. Not yet. There was still something she couldn't quite grasp, a piece of the puzzle that was lingering in the spaces between her thoughts. "Do you ever wonder if we could have done things differently?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as though saying it aloud would make it more real, more permanent. The question wasn't new. It had haunted her for years, weaving its way through her dreams into her waking moments. She had asked herself countless times, but hearing it from her lips now, directed at him, made it feel like a confession. He was quiet for a long while, his gaze lost in the distance where the lanterns slowly faded. His fingers brushed against hers again, his touch grounding her, as though he too had sensed the question and knew it was one that needed to be answered, even if the answer wasn't easy. "Sometimes," he said finally, his voice tinged with a sorrow that mirrored her own, "I wonder if we were ever meant to go down different paths at all. Maybe we were always supposed to meet again here, at this very moment. Maybe the distance and time were just part of the journey we had to take." Amara looked up at him, her heart aching. "I've missed you in ways I can't even put into words. And yet, I also know that I've changed. We've both changed. I don't know if I can go back to who I was, who we were, back then." Her breath caught in her throat as she felt the weight of her words settle around them. He nodded, his eyes searching hers as though he too was trying to understand what this meant, what they could possibly mean now. "I think we've been given something different this time, not a second chance exactly, but something else, something new." His voice faltered for a moment, then steadied. "It's okay if we don't fit perfectly back into the spaces we left. We can find new ones. We can start here together with this moment and let everything else float away." The words were like a balm to her soul. soothing the raw places that had been untouched for far too long. She had always believed that healing meant putting the broken pieces back together in the exact way they had been before. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't about fixing it all. Maybe it was about learning to live with the cracks, to allow them to be part of the beauty, the uniqueness, the newness of what they were now. She thought of the lanterns again, how each one, no matter how small or dim, still carried light. I think, Amara began, her voice stronger now. I've been afraid of what it means to let go of the past, even though it hurts. Afraid that if I let it go, it would mean losing you again. His fingers tightened around hers. You're not losing me, Amara. We're not losing each other. This isn't about letting go completely, it's about holding on in a different way. A silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was like a space where everything unspoken could still exist, still have room to breathe. Amara's gaze wandered back to the lanterns, now drifting farther into the horizon, their light reflecting off the water's surface like scattered fragments of a dream. She realized with a quiet shiver of realization that they weren't truly disappearing, they were just becoming part of the bigger picture, just as she and he were now. Maybe, she murmured, the lanterns are like us. We're not lost, we're just finding our way home. He smiled at that, and for the first time it wasn't just a smile of longing or regret. It was a smile of something new, something that had sprouted from the roots of their shared history, but had grown into something completely unexpected, something whole. I like that, he said softly, finding our way home. As they sat there, side by side, their fingers still intertwined, they let the world around them melt away, sinking into the quiet comfort of simply being together again. The lake whispered its lullaby to the stars, the gentle current of time carrying them forward, one small step at a time. And Amara, for the first time in what felt like forever, felt the weight lift from her shoulders. She didn't have to have all the answers. She didn't need to know how it would all unfold. All she needed was this moment, this peace, this connection. And with every lantern that continued its journey across the water, she knew they were moving forward together, not away from the past, but alongside it, both changed, both new, both willing to let the night wrap them in its quiet promise that healing too takes time. It takes patience, it takes faith in the spaces between. As the last lantern disappeared from view, swallowed by the horizon, Amara closed her eyes, taking in a deep breath, feeling the softness of the night wash over her. There was still so much to understand, so much to explore, but for now she felt the truth in her heart. They had begun again, and that was enough. The night deepened, its vastness wrapping around them like a tender embrace. The moon hung higher now, casting a silver glow that touched everything, the water, the trees, their faces, as though the world itself was bathed in a quiet reflection of the light inside them both. There was an unspoken agreement between them, a silent acknowledgement that no matter where the future led, this moment would be etched into the core of their beings like an unbreakable thread connecting the past and the present. Amara turned to look at him, his profile illuminated by the soft moonlight. His expression was serene, but she could see the subtle flickers of thought in his eyes, as though he too was reliving the journey they'd both endured to get here. I've thought about what you said, she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath, as if the words themselves were fragile, about not fitting perfectly back into the spaces we left. I think I've been afraid of losing the person I was before everything changed. I've held on to the idea that who I was then is the only version of myself that matters. He turned towards her, his gaze softening as he listened. his fingers still gently holding hers. I think I've been afraid of that too, of losing myself, of losing you in the process of trying to move forward. The silence between them was filled with the hum of understanding. There was no rush to fill the space with words. There didn't need to be. The night itself seemed to cradle them in its gentle quiet, offering comfort in the soft rhythm of their shared presence. But the calmness, the stillness, wasn't without its depth. Amara knew there was more to uncover, more to face, because even though they had found their way back to each other, there was still the question of what came next. How would they rebuild? Could they rebuild? Do you ever wonder, she began again, her voice steady but carrying the weight of something unspoken, if the person we were before, if that version of us was even meant to last? Maybe we weren't supposed to stay the same. Maybe all the brokenness was a part of it. The growth, I don't know. He paused, his hand reaching up to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear, the gesture so tender that it made her chest tighten. I've always thought that the pieces of us that broke, that fell apart, those were the things that made us stronger in the end. Not in spite of the pain, but because of it. We carry it with us now. It's part of our story, and maybe that's enough to carry it together. A soft breeze stirred, ruffling the leaves in the trees. The air was cooler now, and Amara found herself leaning in slightly, drawn to the warmth that radiated from his presence. She couldn't help but wonder if this connection was the very thing they needed to heal, this simple act of being with each other in the quiet moments, without expectations, without rushing to fix anything. They were simply allowing themselves to exist in the same space again. I've missed this, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Just being here with you, just sitting here, no pressure to figure it all out. It feels like everything that's been heavy is finally lifting, even just a little. He smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes, and nodded. I've missed this too. I've missed us. And I've missed this, the quiet, the peace that only comes when we stop trying so hard to make things right and just let them be. Sometimes the answers we need aren't as loud as we expect them to be. They're in the spaces between, in the silence, in just being. Amara closed her eyes for a moment, allowing his words to settle in her heart. It felt as though the night had slowed, as though time itself had taken a breath and was letting them catch up to it. The lanterns, now nearly out of sight, seemed to mirror that sensation, drifting far away, yet still glowing faintly, a reminder of the journey, of the letting go, and of the quiet, steady current that carried them forward. The sound of the water lapping gently at the shore was a soothing lullaby, and Amara found herself leaning her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath, the rhythm of it grounding her in a way that words never could. They were here, together, present, and for the first time in a long time, the weight of all the uncertainties didn't seem so daunting. Do you think we're ready for what comes next? She asked, her voice soft and vulnerable, though she didn't feel afraid of the question anymore. There was something in her, something that had healed in the quiet, in the simple presence of him, that allowed her to ask without fear of the answer. Whatever it was, she knew they would face it together. He turned slightly, his cheek brushing against the top of her head, and he chuckled softly, the sound low and comforting. I don't know if anyone ever really knows if they're ready for what comes next, he said, but I think we're more ready than we've ever been, because we're here. We've already taken the first step, and that's enough. For a long moment they didn't speak again. They just sat together in the stillness, watching as the last traces of the lanterns disappeared into the distance. But as they lingered there beneath the vast, timeless sky, Amara knew something deeper was unfolding, something that had nothing to do with answers or the finality of the past. It was about trust, trust in the journey, trust in the moment, trust in the fact that even in the uncertainty of what lay ahead, they would always have each other. And so, as the night carried on, as the stars continued to glitter above them, and the world moved quietly around them, Amara realized that they had already found their way home, not in the lanterns, not in the answers, but in the soft, quiet moments when they allowed themselves to simply be together. And in that truth, she found a peace that was more profound than she had ever imagined. For now, that was enough. The hours passed in a serene blur, the quiet of the night enveloping them like a protective cocoon. The stars above had shifted, their positions subtly changing as time flowed silently onward. But the moment they shared seemed timeless, no rush, no expectation, just the steady rhythm of their breaths and the soothing sounds of the world around them. Amara eventually lifted her head from his shoulder, her eyes still heavy with the peace of the moment. She gazed out over the lake once more, where the last of the lanterns had long since vanished into the horizon. The water, now calm and still, seemed to hold its own secret, like it too was at peace, having watched them let go, move on, and finally find their way back to each other. "Are you ready?" she asked softly, her voice barely more than a whisper in the night air, her eyes searching his for the answer she knew she had already found. He smiled, the warmth of it gentle, yet carrying a quiet strength that reassured her. "I've been ready. We both have." She nodded, feeling something deep within her settle. The journey wasn't over, and she knew it would continue with all its uncertainties. But what she also knew, what they both knew now, was that they weren't alone. They had each other, and in that everything had changed. The fear that once clung to her heart, the doubt, the uncertainty, those things seemed small now, fleeting shadows against the light they had found together. She stood slowly, pulling him up with her. The ground felt solid beneath her feet now, and for the first time in a long while, Amara realized she wasn't walking through life with hesitation. She was moving forward with intention, with clarity, no longer burdened by the past, but carrying its lessons with her like a well-worn map that would guide them through the future. The night air was cool against her skin as she took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the freshness of the world. She could feel the promise of new beginnings, the quiet hum of possibility. Together they could create something different, something that had its roots in the past, but grew into something uniquely their own. They walked side by side toward the small wooden pier at the edge of the lake, where the reflection of the moonlight danced like silver ribbons on the surface. The wooden planks creaked softly beneath their feet, but it wasn't a sound of instability. It was a sound of a foundation, one that had been tested, worn, and weathered, but one that stood strong just like them. At the end of the pier, they paused, looking out over the water, and for a long time neither spoke. There was nothing left to say, nothing more they needed to hear. Everything had already been shared in the silences between them, in the quiet understanding that filled the spaces where words couldn't reach. And then, as the final stroke of the night's calm passed, Amara turned to him, her heart full, her spirit light. "We're ready," she said, her voice carrying the certainty of a truth they had both come to understand. He nodded, his eyes reflecting the quiet depth of the night, of everything they had been through and everything they were becoming. "We always have been." The world felt vast, endless, and full of promise as they stood there, side by side, facing the horizon where the stars stretched out like infinite possibilities. They knew the journey ahead wouldn't be without its challenges. There would still be moments of doubt, of fear, of longing, but now they knew how to navigate those moments together with love, with patience, and with the understanding that some things are never truly lost. They are simply waiting to be rediscovered. And as they stood there at the edge of the water, a soft breeze stirred around them once more, carrying with it the scent of fresh earth, the hint of something new. The lanterns had floated away, and the night was drawing to a close. But within them something had been awakened, something deeper than they had known before. A quiet peace, a shared love, a bond that no distance or time could ever sever. As they turned to leave, their hands still intertwined, Amara knew this was just the beginning. The night, the lanterns, the past, all of it had led them here to this moment. And with every step they took together, they would keep walking, knowing that no matter what came, they would always have each other, always. And that in the end was more than enough.